Okay, let's kick this thing off. Right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this election rally. I'm Will Dry. I'm the chair of the Communist Party's Elections Commission, and I'll also be chairing this rally. So whether you're interested in joining the party, community organising, standing as a Communist Party candidate in future, or if you're just interested in our election work, current and future, then you're in the right place. Tonight, you'll be hearing from a panel of speakers from the party who will enlighten, infuse, educate, and maybe even entertain you on the scope and scale of our recent work. There will be no Q&A, but please feel free to post your contributions in the chat or the feed if you're joining us from X, Facebook, Instagram, or elsewhere. So to add some context, this is the biggest campaign the Communist Party has contested, election campaign, I should say, in a generation, which raises a very important question, which is, why are the communists even standing in elections in the first place? So to be clear, we're under no delusions about Parliament or the next Labour government. It's not a question of if or even when Starmer's Labour Party will betray the working class. That has already happened. Even before Labour forms the next government, they have already been bought and paid for by private interests. And once in power, that debt will have to be repaid. This, of course, has grave consequences for the working class, for workers' rights, public services, the NHS, and the victims of the imperialist wars they have committed to continue funding. But where does this leave the working class? With no representation in Parliament, no voice, and further disillusion with establishment politics, we must provide the voice and representation the working class have been denied to get an alternative message of justice, peace, and anti-imperialism to a mass audience and make the case for a socialist future for Britain, to counter the hateful, divisive, racist rhetoric of the far right, who seek to capitalize on the mass disillusionment and pit the working class amongst ourselves. Our participation in elections allows us to achieve all of these things and more. The results so far speak for themselves. We have increased our vote in the recent London Assembly elections by 24%, and wherever we have stood candidates, our message has been met with enthusiasm on the doorstep, at our street stalls, and in the hustings. We've been recruiting new members everywhere and picking up votes and support in the most surprising places. The working class are desperate for real change after decades of devastating neoliberalism. We are the only party standing in these elections offering that alternative. We are the only party standing in these elections that the rich cannot buy. We will continue to build on the work that we started in this year's local and parliamentary elections. The Communist Party is growing bigger, stronger, and louder. We will contest the English local elections and mayoral elections next May, the Scottish Parliament, Welsh Senate, and London boroughs in 2026 and beyond. We're now fully committed to fight for the working class in every electoral arena. Our panel will now tell you a bit more about that work. And it's time to hear from our first speaker, Emma-Jane Phillips, Communist Party candidate for Newcastle upon Tyne East and Wallsend, on local campaigning and fighting for disability rights. Take it away, Emma.
Right. Evening. I wanted to say that this is something I never ever thought I would do. I did not anticipate standing in any constituency. And I'm one of these people I think I'm quite embarrassed to say, but I think for years I have hidden behind the presumption that people assume I'm left wing. I never really wore my beliefs really on my shoulder because I was always worried about what people would think. And one of the reasons why I not only agreed to stand in my constituency this time, but I did so actually with quite a lot of excitement, is because I really do believe in the party policies. I believe in socialism. I believe in all those roots that the working class, we're there. We need to be brought forward. We need to be given our status almost back, no longer oppressed. But what I found is that ability to be free and say what I thought, I always felt hemmed in. I was so worried about the perception, about what people would think, about the abuse I was going to get. And I just decided this time that, do you know what? How can I expect my child to stand up for what she believes is right if I'm not prepared to stand up for what I believe is right, regardless of what's going to get thrown at me? So that was almost like a liberation moment. And it's been really one of the best things I've done. I've always been one member that didn't dare engage fully in the campaigning because the idea of doors or canvassing, stalls, when you're in a wheelchair, it's it's challenging. And I always felt as if I was no use. I thought, what, I can't contribute to anything. And in a way, I think that actually was me reinforcing the belief that government and society is putting on the disabled already. You know, you're not worth it. You can't do anything. Go and hide back in your corner. So I've learned a lot about myself and the society I'm in as I've done this. I'm really lucky. We have an amazing branch. They did everything they could to raise the party profile. We did door to doors, we had motorcades, we had stalls, and it was just great because I couldn't do it by myself because I can't do a lot of the things. But everyone rallied round, so it really was a united effort to change the government for the better. And what I found as well was the more we spoke to people, the more open people were to talk to us. I was expecting everyone to be closed off and go, oh no, no, that's a fairy tale and a little utopian dream. And there's nothing wrong with it being a little utopian dream. World's got to succeed somehow. But people were open and they were willing to listen to what we had to say. And that I think is an indicator that actually the socialist revolution is starting to take hold. One of the things we looked at, or I focused on quite predominantly, and mainly because it was a natural assumption to put me with this, and that's the NHS and disability rights, and almost the intersectionality of issues that come with the perceptions of migrant workers and those who are disabled and those who are on benefits. There is a perception that we need to change, and it's a perception that puts down people and makes them subclass, subcultures. So you end up with a layer of people at the bottom of society who everyone has given up on. But actually, that's a wrong perception. The perception that we have been taught now is that everyone disabled is on benefits. We're on benefits, we don't contribute, we're just there, we're a drain on society. The majority of disabled people are not on benefits, mainly because you can't survive on disability benefits. But there's this perception that if you have PIP or a mobility car, you're a faker. The fact now they're even looking to more dehumanizing elements. So you're not now classed as being on benefits where you get a money support to help you enable you into daily care livings and independent living. What now they're saying is, we don't want to give you cash. You can't be trusted. We're going to give you vouchers. So we're now having all that autonomy taken away from us with the underpinning tone that you're not worthy, you're not capable, you're not part of this culture. We have to nanny you, we have to look after you. You're doing a take, take, take. And that's so wrong because workers are workers. And the disabled people have just as much to contribute, if not more, than those who are not disabled. But we're constantly put down, and you have to fight every way to break through the stereotype. So not only do I have to break through the stereotype of being a communist, and therefore I must be, wanting to live in China or Russia, but I'm now a woman, so therefore I'm speaking out of my turn, and then I'm a disabled woman. So I tick so many boxes. It's a lot of perceptions to get through. But it's a perception that we need to fight. We need to show that workers are workers. It doesn't matter what they look like, where they're from. A worker is a worker, and they contribute equally to their place in society and the successful willing and profitability of that society. Where I'm from is a feeling of despair. We've got generational poverty, we've got large immigrant populations, we've got a lack of integration, we've got some very, very poor resources, we've got shortage of dentistry, we've got everything that you would normally class as being something that is a fundamental right of civilized society is missing. And people are looking for a blame culture. And that means that when you're going out and you're talking and you're facing to people, they're looking for someone to blame. And so one of the things we tend to get is a knee-jerk reaction on the doorsteps. It's the immigrants, it's people like you, it's this, it's that. And actually, in fact, what we need to do is try and just take a step back, acknowledge that that is their view, and it is that they're entitled to their view, but it comes from a place of fear. And until we can show a realistic and sensible and organized alternative that's going to take them out of their roots of fear and show them a way forward, we're going to have to constantly battle to get out from our own enemies. The infrastructure of society is eroded. We've got the basic rights, the shelter, the clothing, the food. Those are no longer things that we can actually count on, that we can rely on. There are people who work full-time jobs 37 hours a week and still cannot pay their bills. They still have to go to food banks. We still have children with hand-me-downs. It's back to when I was in the 70s, when I grew up in the 70s, and you didn't have enough food to eat. Only now there's this culture where not only is it that, where we used to have a say, so, everyone was all in together, we all rallied round. Now we're all in it together, but we're all blaming each other. And that is the exact opposite of what communism and unity stands for. And for me, this election is about sowing that seed. It's about showing the socialist way of coming together to create a better place for everyone, that everyone is deemed to have their own place in society, that they don't have to conform to a perception that one person thinks is what a contributing member and valued member of society is versus a more stereotypical view, that we each contribute in our own ways, because only by uniting and embracing the differences will we actually end the continual put down, oppressive and controlling nature of the capitalist powers that are in the minority, that are so entrenched in their oppression that the working classes have no idea what their potential is. The working classes have the power, but they don't know it. And the more we put ourselves forward, the more we start saying there is an alternative, there is an alternative, there is an alternative, and sowing those seeds and talking about the alternatives in a reasoned and balanced way, when we to show that alternative, then we give the working classes the belief to present the narrative that we are showing them, to restore that self-belief in themselves and their classes, to know and be proud of the fact that they are working classes, rather than trying to fit into a middle-class mold. This is the starting point. This election is a starting point where we sow that seed for the continual revolution. We might not get a seat this time, but there's always next time. And I firmly believe that that our party is the one true and effective way forward for society justness. And I finished on
Thank
time.
you, Emma. You did well done. Perfect. Um, so our next speaker is Rochelle Russell, who is our candidate for Taunton and Wellington, who will be talking to us about her campaign and organising in the community.
Hello. Right, I'd like to start by just saying a huge thank you to everyone. All of the comrades have pulled this together. I mean, I've worked on long campaigns, and to have such a short period of time to get this done, it's just the most amazing thing. It's been such a positive experience, and I'm really grateful to be part of it. I'm not quite sure how I'm a part of it, but when it was first suggested that I put myself forward as a candidate, I can remember saying yes without hesitation, because I do tend to do that. But on the understanding that I did genuinely think we could find someone better, but no one else came forward. So here I am. I also said that for me personally, May and June would be the worst possible time for an election to be called. So that's another thing I can hold against the Tories. Anyway, here we are at the end of the campaign. It's been a truly inspiring and uplifting experience. And I only moved to Somerset a couple of years ago, and so I had no idea what to expect. Our branch is very, very small, and so I knew we'd have limited capacity. But Liz Payne and I looked at our resources. We worked out as efficient a strategy as we could, based on street stalls, and we couldn't really do door knocking. But we have done hustings and a newspaper interview, and I've done a small radio interview. So we've done quite well, I think, given our capacity. And I think it's been really a successful campaign for us, despite being considerably more low key than elsewhere. And here's why I think that. We've recruited 6 new members to our branch. So doubled our membership through this campaign. All but one is living either in Taunton or where I live here in Wellington, and they're all keen to play an active role in the branch going forward. This is a direct result of our party appearing on the ballot after such a long time, and our leaflets being very well received, even by people who've said they won't be voting for us. I should just qualify that this is one of those seats that the Lib Dems are throwing everything, including the kitchen sink at, because I think they're going to take the seat, and it is quite a Lib Dem stronghold down here. So, we've had a lot of people who are voting strategically to get the sitting Tory MP out, and they're voting Lib Dem, and that's fair enough. That's what they're doing. But even those people have come up and, you know, that they've been really interested in the leaflets. People have been reading the leaflets and then wanting to talk about them. Our sixth new member is an indomitable lady called Maisie, who's 81, and she saw a postman dumping a whole bunch of my leaflets in her bin, and she went out and challenged him. So she, although she probably won't be able to do a great deal at 81, I encourage her to join the branch, and I'll keep her informed because she just sounds amazing. And she comes from a family of socialists and communists, as do a lot of people that I've been in contact with since the start of this campaign, which is just amazing to hear. We've had good coverage in the local paper. They did a really pretty good interview, very fair. We've had 2 really good hustings, which is something I haven't done for quite a long time, so it's a bit nerve-wracking. But I think, again, they went really well. They were a positive experience. I've done a brief little radio interview. I was only asked one question. And then the leaflets have gone everywhere that we could get them to. We've been out again today, popping them through doors. And I should say at this point that I'm really grateful for the help that we've received from members who come from other branches to help out. It's been great to have the extra people out with us. So our leaflet has been thought-provoking, and the feedback has actually been overwhelmingly positive. And if we're to continue building our branches in the party, it's vital that we continue to counter decades of negative propaganda by using every opportunity to speak to people and to raise our profile and keep putting out our message. I mean, it's so reasonable. And I think that is what has surprised a lot of people that I talked to. A, they were surprised that there was a communist in the area. And B, I think they were genuinely interested at how reasonable our leaflets were. So, you know, it's all positive. And obviously not everyone agrees with it, but people were willing to discuss. And I think that's what's been missing in our politics recently, is just that broadening of the discourse and the willingness for people to discuss rather than just go backwards and forwards. So many people have said they had no idea, as I said, that there was a local communist party, although a lot had communist and socialist connections through their families. And this goes all the way back to one man's father, who stood in Taunton as a communist back in the early 60s. And his grandfather worked for Harry Pollitt up in Seaham, which coincidentally is where I come from. So, you know, that's just a really nice little connection. And we've been making these connections all through the past few weeks. So our new members, these connections with constituents and the history of local activity, they'll all help us to build the branch, but we need to work hard if we're going to build that on solid ground. It's crucial that we take full advantage of our raised profiles to encourage new members not only to join, but to stay. And as it says on the leaflets, deeds, not words. We need to have regular activity outside branch meetings to give members positive action to be a part of, and to let the general public and our future voters know that we're more than just a talking shop. So last year, I attended Ruth Pittman's new members meetings, and they were just invaluable, and they were a great bonding experience. And as we grow our branches, they will be a fantastic resource, and I understand they are going to continue. And I'm very grateful to Ruth for the huge amount of work she put into those, because they really helped us focus as new members on what we were doing and what we wanted to do going forward. So last year, after attending Ruth's classes, I actually met up with a couple of the people that we'd only met online, and I think those bonding exercises will really help us when we're out in the community to then carry on building those links with other community groups and just keep the dialogue going, and also find a way that we can actually be of service in our communities, because I think that is what will bring people round to thinking of us as something other than what the propaganda has fed them for decades and decades. So it is important to get that support and to encourage new members to get used to talking to members of the public and having the confidence to do that. I mean, it is, you know, it can be quite scary when you're door knocking or you set up a stall and random people come up to talk to you. You know, I always take it as a good thing when people don't agree with me, because I like that backwards and forwards dialogue. I like asking people questions and just finding out why they think what they think and sharing what I think. But it's hard sometimes, you know, not everyone is naturally comfortable with doing that, so it's a difficult thing. And sometimes, you know, we do face hostility, so you know you need the confidence to be able to deal with that, and that is where the bonding and the solidarity is invaluable. So in my experience, I should say at this point, most encounters I've had are at the very least civilized, and more often than not, they're really positive. We can't always persuade people to our way of thinking, but at least, you know, they'll go away knowing that someone's listened to them. And I think that's really important, because a lot of what I've heard over the years is, oh, you only turn up when you want the vote. You don't want to know anything else. And, you know, I have to say, in my experience, that has very frequently been the truth. And that's an insult. That, you know, how can we expect people to vote for us if we're not actually going to listen to what it is they want and need, you know? So we need to put together programs that include a full range of activities so that we can appeal to as many people in the community as possible. So, you know, everything from street stalls at any public event we can get to, film nights, lectures, exhibitions, you know, local history, anything that we can pull the community and our branch members into that will build those strong bonds. We need to be looking at all of that. And I know we all have limited resources, and I mean, down here in the West Country, they are really quite limited. You know, we are fairly scattered. You know, you can't just hop on a bus around here and be in someone's house in half an hour. You know, so I appreciate that it's not an easy task, but it is the only way I can see that we will build our membership, build our party, and support our communities. So, although we've got limited resources, I do think it's only by being visibly integrated into the community that we'll grow. And on that point, it is absolutely vital that we stand in local elections wherever we can. One of the things that's been so good about this campaign has been the communication and the offers of help between branches, you know, so we can support each other going forward, because again, local elections, they might not be quite as scary as the general election, but you know, they're still quite a challenge. So support between branches will be really important going forward when we do that work. And it's particularly helpful down here in rural areas when, as I said, when we are really quite scattered. So long may this working continue between the branches and the district. And I think it's really important that, having raised our profile and had that platform, we can maintain and develop links with community groups and so on that we've made contact with during this campaign and in future campaigns, when hopefully that will continue. We need to show that wherever there is work to be done, our communities will find communists ready to roll up their sleeves and assist and get involved. And in conclusion, I believe there's more than one way of winning, and we might not win a seat this time, but we're working our way back into the heart of our communities and rebuilding our party. And on a personal level, this is my personal goal. At some time in the future, when some of us are long gone, communists will win seats, and the work we're doing now will have given them that opportunity. This will have been the start. So onwards and upwards, comrades.
Thank you so much for that, Rochelle, and congratulations on your very excellent ground campaign and doubling the size of your branch. And you make a really important point about the work doesn't end, you know, at polling day. We build on this and we go back better and stronger each time. And I'm confident in all of our lifetimes we're going to at least see a communist council elect in this country and become a real political force in British politics, you know, and actually put the fear of God into the establishment, hopefully. So next we have Drew Gilchrist, who is our candidate for Coatesbridge and Bells Hill, who will be talking to us on the particularities of campaigning in Scotland and building unions. Take it away, Drew.
Thanks, Will. I just wanted to start with a thanks for the party. for inviting me to speak tonight on two quite important issues, but also for letting me stand on behalf of the party in the general election, as well as a thanks to my comrades in the Lanarkshire branch for helping put up the work here the last couple of months and getting our campaign off the ground. So, as you say, I've been asked to speak about local organising in Scotland, as well as the importance of being active in your trade union. And I know these are definitely issues that, as a party branch, we had as focal parts of our discussion since long before I joined the party. And I want to start by giving just a wee small bit of history about Coatbridge and the wider county. And you know, Lanarkshire's it's a county with a long and proud history ingrained within the socialist, communist and trade union movement. Gone as far back as the Radical Wars 1820, Lanarkshire workers played a really important part in the strike actions and push for reform that came for the uprising. Major figures like Labour leader Keir Hardie, prominent communist and trade unionist Mick McGahey, and Irish Republican Margaret Skinnerd came from the Coatbridge and surrounding towns. And even in modern times, from the Caterpillar strikes in the 80s and the now infamous action taken by workers in Rolls-Royce against fighter jet engines being sent to Pinochet's coup, this all happened through local organising, active trade union activity and communist influence in what is a rural, post-industrial and quite disjointed area, you know, and it's been, which has allowed the county really punch above its weight, and that owes to the power of collective action and class-conscious political work. Looking at local organising in Scotland, I'll have to do a bit of a disservice because there's so much that's happened over the past few years. There's been many victories and a lot of losses. What's probably been the biggest example, and I recently wrote an article for the Morning Star about it, and it's definitely been one of the number one issues I've been asked about while out campaigning, is the crisis in local government. Councils across Scotland are facing massive budget reductions from the Scottish Government, and many will most likely find themselves in deficit over the next year. There's simply nothing left to cut. But as usual, this has become a political ping pong between the major parties to score points. What's really missing is the political will to actually address the issue. The SNP are quite content where they are in simply pushing the blame onto Westminster. The local Labour councils are more than happy to push the blame onto local government, onto the Scottish Government. What they're doing is simply plastering over the issues by bringing in private capital and businesses to cover service pitfalls. But what's interesting is how the local communities have organised around the issue. They've hit back with consistent grassroots actions, picketing, leafleting, spontaneous organising, political targeting, and in May they even disrupted a council meeting and took it over. But this was off the back of over a year of cuts to education, cuts to teachers, cuts to support staff, to education centres, and now the one that's tipped the bucket is cuts to school transport, which will put these families' children at risk. But what seems really to be missing from these grassroots campaigns that kind of spring out of the material changes usually observed to have been caused by government policy is a real class-based political analysis of why private capital has been prioritised over public services. So when we look at campaigns like the Wynford Tenant Union in Glasgow, for example, they could put a face to the enemy. Wheatley Homes was there and can be seen. And there's copious amounts of evidence of them prioritising poor quality, high cost housing over hundreds of socially affordable homes, and how they kind of manipulated the local council and political system to achieve this. Unite 13th Note campaign in Glasgow also could point to business owner Jacqueline Fennessy and her prioritisation of profit over health and safety and better wages for staff. The council cuts, however, seem to default to more personal campaigns, either against councillors or MSPs, rather than any actual analysis of the wider crisis in the selling off of public assets to increase the profits of what's often multinational companies like ISS and Servco. Many of these campaigns themselves try to keep the politics out of it, hoping that simply campaigning against individual councillors will push them to reverse their decisions. And you know, that this kind of comes to the important role that is communists and trade unionists have to play within their communities and workplaces. And where specifically we in Scotland have seen the most success in local organising has been where we were able to link the industrial, political and social struggles under the banner of class-conscious analysis of where we were at that moment in the campaign. There's a lot of criticism that can be lobbied at some of the larger unions campaigns. We've seen kind of Unite's handling a Tata Steel down in Wales, but when we look at the campaign that they've launched here in Grangemouth up in Scotland, the local conveners and the local organisers didn't limit their work or their actions to simply talking and organising the workers in the oil refinery or the gas refinery, but they went out to local communities and drummed up support from churches, bakers, shop owners, schools, places in the community that would have been devastated by the plant's closures. They put political weight on the main parties as well. Unite and the Scottish Trade Union Congress helped organise a massive community hustings that scrutinised Labour's failure to address the energy problem here in Scotland and with any real substance in the SNP's prioritisation of foreign multinational companies over Scottish communities. But what's still missing is a vision of what needs to be built to replace the current system. Once that campaign's finished, what then? What movement have you really built? What lessons are being built on to ensure that in another 5 years the same doesn't happen again? Trade unions are the organs of the mobilised working class, and their involvement in them isn't simply like some other left-wing party strategies where it's simply to infiltrate and change policy. Although we should be fighting for policies and international peace, Unite's front against capitalism and for socialist politics, but to organise within our workplaces and communities to show the power of collective actions. We should be aiming for unions to be conduits of class education to workers, to learn and develop from both victories and losses, to show the issues with housing, to show that issues like housing is as much an industrial issue as it is a social one. To build affordable homes at the rate that we need them, we'll also need well-paid unionised apprenticeships in construction, which will also need fully funded colleges and teaching staff, and a nationalised manufacturing and housing materials. And these workers workers will bring trade unions with them on certain issues of policy. Scottish comrades have wrote quite extensively for the Star and other publications about this year's Scottish Trade Union Conference in Dundee, where we did suffer some defeats in motions being passed that were pro-war or failing to pass the no-cuts motions. However, specifically during the vote on no cuts, a notable portion of delegates from the larger unions representing local authorities walked out, so they wouldn't need to vote against an anti-cuts motion that they as council workers fully supported. And that shows that when we go out into these communities and we talk to these people, both in the workplace and out in the street, they're agreeing with us. And they'll go to their unions and they'll try and pull them to the way that the conditions that they're facing as workers. They've seen the brutality of service cuts in local communities. They've seen the failure of partnership models within local authorities and the National Health Service, and they want to see their unions more visible and active in building resistance to a managed decline in their living standards. And building up a political understanding of these issues within the workplace is crucial to building an effective union. And an example I can kind of give from my own work as a shop steward up here in NHS Scotland is we were meant to go into pay negotiations last year, and it should have been implemented on the 1st of April. We've only just got notice that the new health minister is willing to start negotiations at the end of July. So they're waiting to see how well they'll do in the general election. They're waiting to see what they can get from any future Labour government. But already management have been going to staff, telling staff that either they're not going to get a wage rise or it's going to be pittance. So already within the kind of consciousness of NHS workers, it's, well, what's the point? What's the point in organising? So what we've done as a branch, and I've done within my department, is we showed them examples that had been produced, or reports that had been produced by the STUC anti-tax reforms, saying, look, the money's here, the money's there. It's just being exported. It's been exported to Europe. It's been exported to Washington. It's been took out in profits by private companies like, as I said earlier, ISS and Servco. And it's also in land up here in Scotland. So what we need is a wealth tax and a land tax, and that would also, and as well, tax reforms to like council tax, to take that burden away from working class families and put it onto the wealthy in our society. When we sat down, we explained this report to them. All of a sudden, it was, well, this is just going from me fighting for better wages to wait, there's actually a political element to this. And then we started to discuss about the upcoming election and what the local candidates were saying. And that's where, you know, for my own campaign, I seemed to gather a lot of support within health workers. But also the unions, from a trade union perspective, we had to abandon this service model of organising that was developed to keep the kind of heads above the water after the Thatcher years. And where we've seen them do this, you know, there's been massive success in organising workers, even in industries that were traditionally difficult to unionise, like hospitality, which now have branches and workers that are some of the most effective trade unionists in fighting for boycott, divestment and sanction in the pro-Palestine movement, and organising cultural events to highlight the struggle of working class women in Glasgow and the importance of uniting, the importance they played in uniting the rent strikes and industrial trade unions to build an effective anti-war movement up here, an anti-war and anti-landlord social movement essentially. So I guess what I'm kind of saying is there's a lot, I guess what I'm trying to say, there's a lot that we can learn from our own working class history, but nothing really beats that kind of first-hand experience. And to get that, you have to be visibly and consistently organising in our workplaces and communities, highlighting that the only way that we're able to progress the struggle or fight for a better future is to unify both industrial, social and political struggles. I hope I didn't rant too long for you there, Will.
Not at all. Thank you for that. It was very insightful and always important to highlight how vital it is to ensure that trade union work is never divorced from the wider political situation. So next I've got Luke Daniels, who's not a candidate, but he's the president of the Caribbean Labour Solidarity. He's speaking to us in a personal capacity on anti-racism and anti-imperialism. So take it away, Luke.
Need to unmute. Thank you very much for that introduction, Will. As you said, I'm not campaigning, but I'm actually live in Islington, and after speaking with the comrades here, they've agreed that, you know, we should support Jeremy Corbyn to be run as an independent. Seems to me like this last year I've been involved in lots of elections. I think the first one really I should speak about is the local election. The first time I'm standing at the tube station on the street corner with Communist Party flyers, trying to attract attention and engage people, which was a really great experience, because I think for some people that see the Communist parties having no chance of getting elected. So I think I try to make light of it by telling people, you know, elect the next winner, you know, we'll be there. And people would engage and have a little conversation. We can have a laugh about it, but it's really important that we get the message out and be visible, and I think that's important. Then the next elections I've just had recently, and for the first time, you know, in the Communist Party, being elected to the district community in North London. So, and running on from that election, I'm now supporting Jeremy Corbyn this election, knocking on doors. I've been out there almost every day for the since the election really has been announced. And it's been a terrific experience doing that. Engaging with people at the doors has been really rewarding. Sometimes there's a lot of love for Jeremy Corbyn, clearly, and we could see what makes a difference, that actually he's been in the job here as an MP for over 40 years. He's made a lot of friends. Everybody's got stories about how they've helped them one way or the other. And I think just this hard work that he's put in is beginning to, is paying off in this community. It's paid off in this community. I think from the polling, it looks to me like it looks like 50-50, I must say, at this point. But the working class vote in Islington is standing up for Jeremy. The Muslim vote, the young people and black voters, I think, are there. As we engage with them, there's a pocket of middle class who anti-Corbyn. We had to be engaging with them. The whole experience really for me is the first time of getting so deeply involved, because the only time I really came out in the election was when Jeremy was leader, and for the Labour Party, knocked on doors and so on. But this time it's been deeper. And for me, it showed the importance really of having friendships, because I counted Jeremy as a friend, having known him for over 40 years, because he's always supported our work at Caribbean Labour Solidarity. And I've got one other member who lives in the borough as well, who's been out every day with me. So, the two of us have really been going around. And as a matter of fact, I'll be at a polling station, and for the first time, I'm not sure what I'll be doing yet, either counting people who come in and voted and so on, and I'll get further instruction in that. But the whole experience has been really fantastic. Of course, from the time the elections were announced, straight away, and even before, the race card is the card that has been played. And I'm really fed up with British elections in that sense, is that for the 50 years I've been in this country, almost every election is about whether I'm welcome here or not, and how many of us should be tolerated, and so on. So race is one big crucial issue every time, every election. We had a street party, and I engaged with a black man who I think he was clearly from upper middle class, or, I think they owned hotels, or his family. And he was for Labour, but not for Corbyn. And we had a friendly conversation about that, which I think started to make him think about, what he was saying, because one of the issues I felt that was important in this election is the Starmer not standing up and opposing the two-child policy that the Conservatives have introduced. Most of you will know that, they only support 2 children in a family. If somebody has a 3rd child, the state does not support that child. And I thought it was especially obnoxious that Starmer would not come out and stand with children, child poverty being a huge issue in the UK. And this gave this, black man, I didn't get his name, the time to criticize, because, he thought that it was an okay policy because lots of people make children. If you don't make children, you can't afford to raise. I had to remind them what the working class is, who does the work, and so on. It gave me that opportunity to talk about that broader issue. Also, the issue of racism, and then he also mentioned that, he knows of these black girls who would just get pregnant, so they get a flat and all kind of stuff with that. So I pointed out to him the racism in that, and that was actually a big lie that was being told. And we also have big issues for us as black communities. Why would, a young black woman go to the extreme of getting poverty just to get a flat? What's going on in the family that makes her want to run away, that she's not supported in that family or something. And I engaged with him for a while, and I think he's probably started to shift his thinking a little bit as we go along. So I think it's really important getting out there, talking to people on a one-to-one basis on these issues. I, of course, mentioned reparations, and it's one thing we'll be fighting for. Why it's important that we get Corbyn in Parliament. We know the Labour Party will not support the fight for reparations for slavery. We know Corbyn will raise this issue. He has in the past, and he will support that. And it was important for us to make sure that we have somebody, who will be fighting on these issues, and it'll be raised. I think a lot about reparations for slavery because I feel it's one of the key issues that this country will face. It was one of the biggest movements. The anti-slavery movement was one of the biggest movements this country have ever had. But of course, it's not publicized because showing unity in terms of race and class is not something the only classes want us to learn about or to know about. This education can only really take place on a personal level. And so I will put it out there, and I've been going around to some of the Morning Stars readership groups, Cambridge, Milton Keynes, and Oxford, and I hope other places in the future where we will talk about racism. My first opportunity was with the trade unions, and I must say Unite was invited me to one of the regional conferences where my talk on reparations for slavery, I think, opened a lot of eyes and went down. And the key thing really about education, which reminds me also of the education that we do in the Communist Party group here in North London. I think it's an important aspect of our work, having the information and being able to share it. Straight away, we see in the Labour Party, David Lammy, who's going to be the Foreign Secretary, is already starting to lay the groundwork that clearly, they won't be fighting for any kind of reparations. He's made some kind of comments, but has furthered it by saying he's looking to the future. So, they don't want us looking back to the past. So as a black man from Guyana, where I'm from, I'm just getting ready how to deal with him really and how to combat his foolishness that he's going to be coming out with over the next period of time. Of course, elections are important for us, knocking on the door. Some people said they're not voting. And only today, I nearly said to the young woman, well, I did ask, why are you not voting? She just said, oh, she doesn't like politics or she's not voting. But I almost wanted to remind her that we had to fight hard for the vote. People died, women and men, black people fighting for that democracy, that opportunity to vote. It's not the only solution, but it's a crucial one. So we look around what's happening in the world. In Kenya at the moment, with people out on the streets, a country that has just recently sent policemen to Haiti, being used by the imperialists to go and quell so-called gangs. But we think there's some political activity going on with those gangs. They're obviously making demands. They come together. It might be the beginning of a new revolution. They're supporters of Aristide, who was removed from Haiti, exiled to South Africa for a while before returned and stopped from participating in politics, but there are people there who still fight in his cause. We support us. We've been out on the streets many times, picketing the Kenyan embassy, Canadian embassy, and the imperialists that are actually trying to maneuver in Haiti so they could keep controlling the Haitian resources and the politics of the region. We look around at France and what's happening in terms of race. And although it looks with the fascists on the rise, in a way that has forced the left to galvanize and to come together to combat that. We see also in America with women and Roe versus Wade and the reversal of that, how women have had to become radical again and come out and fight that and starting to make reversals and gains and reversing in many states. and nationally. So resistance is important. I'm not sure how much time I'm doing, and you will please stop me if I've gone over the time. I don't have a timepiece in front of me, but I think it's important that we take part in the elections. I look forward to the next time when we can field more candidates as the Communist Party to get the message out there. The importance of race, I think it's always going to be, and class. As I mentioned, the man who needed a little bit more information and maybe will change his mind about looking at elections and looking at support for radical change in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Luke. And yeah, thanks for reporting back from the front line of Jeremy Corbyn's campaign. Of course, we all wish him the best of luck. Many of our members were activists during the Corbyn leadership, and he continues to inspire millions of working class people in this country. So of course we wish him all the best, and thank you also especially for talking about the good work you're doing and highlighting the harrowing racial injustices that continue to divide the working class in Britain and abroad, and some of the things you're doing to try and address those. So on to our final speaker, and we're very pleased to be joined by Rob Griffiths, General Secretary of the Communist Party, and please forgive my pronunciation, our candidate for Blaenau, Gwent and Rumney, to close us off, talk about campaigning in Wales and hopefully the future, what it holds for us as a party. So take it away, Rob.
Thanks very much, Will, and it's really an honour to be speaking after so many excellent contributions, inspirational contributions from candidates and campaigners from our party. Back in November, we held the 57th Congress of the Communist Party in Britain. We didn't know then what date the general election would be. We knew it would be sometime in 2024, but we had a thorough debate about our general strategic approach. We did that, by the way, at one of the biggest congresses that we've held for a decade or two, reflecting a growth in membership and with over 15 communist parties from around the world, big and small, also present. And we took, I think, a clear position that come the general election, a Labour victory would be preferable to a Tory victory, not because we had any illusions in a future Labour government, and certainly not one led by Keir Starmer, but because our analysis led us to conclude that a Labour victory would create a more favourable set of conditions for continuing the political struggle in Britain, the class struggle in Britain, rather than have to face years of another Tory government. That was still a possibility last November, although a quickly receding one. And in facing yet another Tory government, of course, having to fight again all the battles that we've been fighting, and the Communist Party has often been to the fore in fighting in the 20th century. And we believed that a Labour victory would at least offer the possibility of moving the struggle forward, so that we would be fighting a struggle in the 21st century, rather than repeating yet again experiences that we really should have finished with back in 1945. There shouldn't have been another Conservative government after 1945, but the failures of previous Labour governments, the failures of social democracy, have landed us with more years under Tory government since then than years under Labour government. So the belief, the conclusion at our Congress was that a Labour victory would be preferable to a Tory victory, but in itself would guarantee nothing. Now, of course, we could have been very opportunistic, and as this Labour leadership has shown itself to be the feeble and even treacherous leadership of the Labour Party that it has, it would have been so easy to have buried that position and just had a free-for-all, and we'd simply say, well, vote for whichever candidate you think is the furthest left from whichever organisation or campaign, and we won't have any strategic approach to this election. We could have taken that position, but that wouldn't have been how communists analyse and how communists act. And of course, we've gone into this general election with a feeble Labour manifesto, and in some places, of course, a manifesto that's an outright betrayal of the ideals that the Labour leadership so often claims to trumpet. The complete failure to confront racism, the failure to confront militarism, the failure to confront the crimes of British imperialism in different parts of the world. We've seen all this before from previous Labour manifestos, but I think Labour's reached a new low point in terms of the contents of the current manifesto. And of course, it was therefore important that the Communist Party would look to put forward not a huge number. We don't have those resources as of yet, but it was important that even at such short notice that Sunak gave us and the rest of the peoples of Britain, it was important that we looked to maximise the number of campaigns so that we could put forward a manifesto that was a clear alternative to the Labour manifesto and put the case for left and progressive policies and for socialism and socialist revolution. And that's what we've sought to do, and we've highlighted key questions such as public ownership of the basic utilities and so on, employment rights from day one, for all workers, especially workers in casual and zero-hour contract work, and a large proportion of those, of course, are women and young workers. We've been put in the case for a wealth tax. We've been put in the case against militarism and the new Cold War on China and so on. And I think, as our other candidates have indicated, in doing that, we have not met with the wide-scale hostility that the mass media would have us and you to believe would be the case. We're always told about anti-communism in Britain and how Britain rejects socialism and communism and so on. And of course, there's a core of truth in that. But does that mean that we meet frequent and widespread hostility when we put forward our policies? Absolutely not. That is not our experience at all. What we meet very often is interest on the part of people, especially when they're not inspired by any alternative to the Tory government. Most people are sick of this government and want to get rid of it. But they are certainly not inspired by the Labour Party and its leadership and its policies. And therefore, I've fought probably at least 20 election campaigns in the name of the Communist Party since the early 1990s, and I fought some before then in the name of the party. But I don't think I've ever come across such, I wouldn't call it apathy, but such uninterest and even such hostility towards the Labour Party and its leadership and its policies as I have in this election. Your pronunciation was not bad at all, Will, but keep practicing. But in the seat of Blaenau Gwent and Rumney, which is in a region of South Wales where, as they say, traditionally Labour votes are weighed rather than counted in order to save time, these are historic and historically loyal areas for the Labour Party. This is the constituency that was represented by Aneurin Bevan. This was the constituency represented by Michael Foot. After Foot, we had a very good left, anti-imperialist, anti-militarist MP by the name of Llaw Smith. And on a previous occasion, when people were sick of the Labour apparatus, they elected an independent socialist not so long ago as an MP for this constituency. And yet, you would be hard-pressed to find more than one Labour poster in a window in any one of half a dozen to a dozen of traditional working class former coal mining villages. There are virtually no Labour Party posters, but it wouldn't have been so long ago at all where there would have been streets plastered in with Labour posters in the windows. They're simply not there. And in fact, the only antagonism, apart from one fascist, and I'll mention him again in just a moment, the only antagonism we've had has been from working class women and others coming to the door after receiving our leaflet, telling us to take our leaflet back because they're sick of the Labour Party, which has let them down so badly, and they're sick of the two big parties. And we have to point out that that was not a Labour Party leaflet, that is a Communist Party leaflet. And we then get an apology, and those people say, "Oh, well, give us that back, love. I'll have a look at that by all means." So, you know, that is the mood that we're facing. Now, I've got no illusions. I don't think that necessarily is going to translate into a collapse of the Labour vote and a huge surge in the Communist vote. But there's no doubt at all that people are really fed up with and even angry at the way in which the Labour Party has taken so many working class communities for granted over such a long period of time. And we now have a Labour leadership that openly grovels to big business, gratefully accepts small fortunes now from multinational corporations and the super rich. And millions of working class people feel, quite understandably, that the Labour Party under this leadership has deserted them. And therefore, we are putting forward communist candidates to put forward an alternative position. We still believe that a Labour victory will be preferable to a Tory victory, but we know it guarantees nothing. And therefore, we have fought this campaign in the seats where we've been contesting. Yes, we've been fighting it for the campaign as hard as we can, but we are also fighting this campaign as part of preparing for the future. Preparing for almost certainly, yes, a Labour government, but a Labour government that will be putting forward diluted policies where they have anything progressive at all to propose, but also deeply reactionary policies that will have to be challenged, and challenged by people's movements, by working class organisations, by the trade unions, by the alliances that need to be built up between these working class and progressive and left campaigns and forces. And that's where the Communist Party sees much of its work over the coming period as a force in building those united fronts of working class organisations, but also part of a wider people's front, if you like, of left and progressive campaigns and bodies and movements. So that's what we've been investing in, certainly in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney. I know the same is true next door in another historic working class constituency with a tremendous record of socialist and communist activity. That's in the seat of Merthyr Tydfil and Aberdare. And again, we are getting a very friendly response on so many doorsteps, and we're meeting with such deep disillusionment in the Labour leadership, and we're able to say to them, well, you have a real alternative on July the 4th by voting communist. As I say, I think we're going to be moving into a new phase in the political struggle in Britain after July the 4th, with the almost certain election of a Labour government. Of course, we know that Labour government will be defending capitalism. It'll be defending what we call state monopoly capitalism in Britain. That's the fusion of the power of the state with the economic power of big business. They are fused together to represent the interests of big capital, not only in Britain, but around the world, where the British capitalist class has massive investments outside Britain in exploitation and oppression in so many countries around the world. And British state monopoly capitalism, it's very wealthy, but it's also got very serious structural problems and weaknesses. We saw those come to the fore, for example, in the great financial collapse of 2008, 2009, that did such enormous damage to the British economy, and of course, which had to be bailed out by public money. So structurally, British monopoly capitalism has long-running problems, over-dependence on earnings, foreign earnings by channel through the City of London, over-dependence on the City of London itself as the world's biggest laundromat for dirty money, as one of the world's biggest casinos for speculative capital and so on. We see the historic underinvestment in productive industry in Britain. We see the privatization of key industries and utilities to be run by all kinds of crooks and spivs and gangsters, something, of course, which the Labour government will not confront. And we have an utterly corrupt mass media in Britain that will be unchallenged. Monopoly power will be unchallenged by this Labour government. This is the mass media that has decided that in this general election campaign, Palestine and the slaughter in Palestine has disappeared. It's not mentioned. It's simply vanished off the political agenda. The mass media are not interested in highlighting this issue and interrogating political parties about what they would do to stop Britain's connivance in the genocidal policies of Israel. It's a mass media that's decided that the key questions are, how will any particular party and government stop the boats? How will any government or political party, what will they do to limit tax increases and therefore public spending and public investment? What will any political party and government do to ensure that we continue to ramp up military expenditure and the huge expansion in Britain's nuclear weapons arsenal? That's the agenda of the mass media. And of course, it's also the agenda of the right and of big business capitalism. I mentioned the boats, by the way. We had an experience today. We were in Nantaglaw, an historic mining community where one of the leaders of the great Chartist military uprising of 1839 came from, and there's a monument to him near the middle of the village. It's also the home of a militant unemployed workers movement in the 1930s that was attacked by the police. They drove the police out of the town and kept them out of the town for a couple of days, led by communists, led by a communist county councillor. And then as we distributed the leaflets, we were confronted with one resident who was deeply concerned about immigration, wanted to know what we were going to do about the boats. And, we had to explain to him, well, for a start, where's the evidence of this mass immigration in Nantaglaw or anywhere within a 20-mile radius? There's hardly a non-white face to be seen. And we told him, that he shouldn't read everything. He shouldn't believe everything he reads in the Daily Mail and the Sun. And two of his neighbours who'd come out to hear the discussion were nodding in agreement with that particular approach. And of course, we highlighted the invaluable contribution that immigrants, and in particular, Black immigrants and Asian immigrants, have played in the past and continue to play today. But this is the way in which the mass media have been poisoning the minds of people in Britain to convince them that somehow this small, and it is a relatively small influx of desperate people in need of humanitarian assistance somehow is jeopardizing what they imagine to be the British way of life and all the rest of the nonsense we hear. So I'm afraid Labour has capitulated to this agenda, just as they've capitulated to the Cold War agenda, the privatization agenda, the militaristic agenda, and we are going to have to confront these policies of a Labour government from July the 5th. And that's why, again, an important part of our campaign has been to work with allies, supporting candidates like Jeremy Corbyn, supporting other independent left candidates who've been pushed out of their seats as former Labour MPs and so on, We're not supporting any members of the shadow cabinet who bear collective responsibility for this sharp turn to the right by the Labour leadership, dragging the party with it. And therefore, we are laying the basis, certainly in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney, also in Merthyr, where our candidate is the Trades Council Secretary, a hugely popular and respected figure, Bob Davenport. In the campaigning that we've been doing over the last few weeks, we've actually been digging and deepening our roots in working class communities so that we can build the alliances. We can build the Communist Party at the same time, but a Communist Party at the centre of alliances that will be necessary to challenge this Labour government that is almost certainly going to be elected, but also to challenge the rise of the far right. And again, of course, we look to the events in France, we look to the formation of a new government in the Netherlands, which contains hardcore far-right racists and fascists. We look at how our communist parties around the world are looking to combat the far right in so many countries, not least in India, by the way. And we've had comrades from the Communist Party of India, Marxist, who've settled in Britain. They've been out working with us in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney as well. It's an important part of our work, how we're going to challenge not only the reactionary policies of a Labour government, but how we're going to challenge the rise of the far right and turn that back in working class communities across Britain. And we'll do it by local organisation, building the Communist Party. There will be no significant fundamental change in Britain and no significant movement towards it unless we have a far bigger, more influential Communist Party. That's got to be a lesson to be learned by all on the left from 20th century history. When the left in Britain has been strong and militant and going forward, that has always coincided with the Communist Party getting bigger and stronger and more influential. And not just as a party out for itself, but a party that puts the interests of the working class and the working class movement first, including above our own interests as a party. So we've got an enormous amount of work to do, comrades and friends and supporters, from July the 5th. The Communist Party will be at the centre of that work, but we won't be reacting like headless chickens, confronted with the reactionary policies and the far right and so on. We will always be looking to make as Lenin put it, a concrete analysis of the concrete situation, to analyse things from a class and Marxist and internationalist perspective, so that we can come forward with proposals and a strategic approach that's designed to turn the right back and to create the conditions in which we can go forward to revolutionary change in Britain. So with that, perhaps on that note, I can say, certainly for communists, for so many of our allies, and by the way, my campaign in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney has been organised, and all of my signatories have been former members of the Labour Party. We have members scattered throughout our branch area, but they didn't include any member living in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney. But we have, as I say, all of our nominations are ex-Labour members on the left. We have 2 former Labour Council leaders in our campaign. One of them is actually my election agent. And in that way, we're looking to build and strengthen broad left alliances, as well as to build the Communist Party. And that's also happening, not just in that constituency, but in other seats where we're fighting. So, comrades, the real work, the harder work, even harder than knocking doors and canvassing and holding stalls, vital although those things are, the real hard work will take off after July the 5th, and the Communist Party fully intends to play a central, and with the support of enough members and allies, a leading role in the struggle on every front against exploitation, oppression, British state monopoly capitalism, and British imperialism. And my congratulations, therefore, to our candidates who I know have been fighting hard, to our supporters, to our members, to non-members who've done so much work for us. And we now need to show how involvement and bigger involvement in the electoral struggle is related to building the struggle on every front, where we need to be fighting for working class power and socialism.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was interesting and insightful as always. Yeah, and on the subject of the growing strength and influence of the party, just to give you an idea of that, in this election, the last two red weekends, we hit over 50 towns and cities. We have distributed in this campaign almost 1 million leaflets and viewers. So for those of you who haven't already, there has never been a better time to join the Communist Party and help us build that future. And of course, if you're able to do so, vote Communist on Thursday. Which just leaves me to say a big thank you to all our excellent speakers, and thank you all for joining us, and good evening.